sound of gravel crunching, wind cutting through open land, and a distant car engine roaring closer. She drove through my land like she owned it, shattered my sign, my patience, and 15 years of peace, all before breakfast. That was the morning I stopped being polite and started digging. This is the story of how one HOA president tried to steal my road and found karma waiting at the other end. I still remember that sound, the gravel snapping under tires, the metal screech of my private property sign, splitting in two. Dust rose behind a shiny white SUV, with a smug HOA logo on the door. Behind the wheels sat Clare Phillips, the self-acclaimed queen of Whispering Pines. She waved through her tinted window like she was doing me a favor by trespassing. That's the kind of wave that says, "You can't stop me." 15 years. 15 years of sweat and diesel and busted knuckles keeping that road alive, and she flattened it like a driveway. That was the exact moment I snapped, louder than that signpost. If she wanted a shortcut across my land, I was about to give her one straight down. Before we dig into this wild HOA mess, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments, and hit subscribe so you don't miss how this ends. If you've ever worked land long enough, you start to feel it like it is a part of you. Every rut, every hill, every line in the dirt becomes memory. That road wasn't just a path. It was my artery. I built it by hand, mile after mile, through storm washouts and droughts. 15 years, not a soul disturbed it, until she arrived. The HOA subdivision over the creek Whispering Pines. I swear, there isn't a pine tree within 3 miles. They built it fast, sold it faster, and then Clare Phillips crowned herself queen of the Beige Kingdom. At first, it was little things, cars too close to the fence, golf carts snooping. Then one morning, I saw the tire tracks. Fresh ones, cutting straight through the heart of my dirt road. I followed them, half expecting to find a lost tourist. Instead, I found her white SUV, chrome trim, blasting music loud enough to spook the cattle. She didn't slow down, didn't wave that time either. Day after day, 7:30 sharp, she tore through like she was late for Judgment Day. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe she was lost. Maybe it was a mistake. But the third time, the wave came back. That smug, neighborly wave. That's when I built the sign. Bold black letters. Private road, no trespassing. I planted it right where she always passed. Couldn't miss it. Next morning, the SUV rolled through again. The sign was gone. I found it behind my hay bales, snapped clean in half, like a trophy. That's when I realized this wasn't ignorance, it was arrogance. That night, the sun dipped red over the hills. I sat on my porch, beer in hand, and watched her headlights cut across the field like angry eyes. And that was it. No more signs. No more smiles. If she wanted a shortcut through my life, I'd give her one she'd never forget. Next morning, I called my oldest friend, Derek Miller, the only man I know who owns a backhoe and a sense of humor. "Derek," I said, "you ever feel like teaching karma how to dig?" He laughed. "Brandon, tell me when and how deep." And just like that, the seed of my revenge was planted. They say silence comes before a storm. For me, it started with the hum of engines and a pink blazer standing on my land like she owned the sun. They say calm always comes before a storm. For me, that silence hummed in my bones 2 days later, right before I saw a pink blazer and a megaphone standing on my land. It was a Friday morning. I was patching the fence near the creek when I heard voices, dozens of them. Not the quiet, neighborly kind, the echo of chatter, laughter, and entitlement. I wiped my brow, squinting toward the field. Tirete were. A full crowd standing on my property. Folding chairs, clipboards, balloons, a banner fluttering in the wind. Community access, vote making progress together. For a second, I thought it was some kind of joke. A picnic maybe. Then I saw her, Clare Phillips, queen of HOA drama, front and center in a bright pink blazer, holding a megaphone like she was leading a revolution. I muttered under my breath, "Oh, this ought to be good." As I got closer, she turned with that same politician's smile. "Morning, Brandon," she chirped. Perfect timing. "We're just about to start the vote." "The vote?" I asked, stopping mid. "On what?" "Exactly." She beamed like she'd rehearsed the line. "On integrating your road as a shared community access point. The board believes this will strengthen neighborhood harmony." I blinked. "You're voting on my road." "Oh, don't be dramatic," she said, wabbing a hand. "It's not about ownership. It's about connection. We're all neighbors here." I stared at the crowd, HOA members sipping coffee, nodding like they were at a sermon. Then I looked down at the dirt under her feet. "My dirt, Claire," I said slowly. "You're standing on private land." She giggled, as if I'd told a child's joke. "The board already agreed this portion falls under community easement. We're just finalizing it democratically." "Democratically?" I repeated, half laughing, half furious. "You think you can vote your way onto someone else's property?" "Well," she said sweetly, "the HOA charter allows us to make recommendations to align with community needs. Once it's filed with the county, it's just a matter of formality." I finished. She smiled wider. "Exactly." Behind her, one man actually clapped. That's when it hit me. This wasn't ignorance. It was organized delusion. And Claire, she was the ringmaster. If you're enjoying this insane HOA showdown, hit subscribe right now. Trust me, you'll want to see how far this madness goes. I pointed toward her little setup. "Take this circus off my property before I do it for you." The air went still. Then Claire lowered her voice. Sugar melting into poison. "You'll regret not cooperating with the community." "Brandon," I laughed. Not from humor, but disbelief. "You can't steal someone's land because it's convenient, Claire." She tilted her head, that smile fading just a little. "We'll see what the board says." I turned and walked back toward the barn. Behind me, her megaphone crackled again. "All right, everyone. In favor of the motion, raise your hands." I didn't look back, but I heard the sound. Hands clapping. Votes being cast on my land. That night, the letter came. Inside my mailbox sat a laminated envelope with pastel borders and the HOA logo printed in Comic Sans. Comic Sans. I wish I were kidding. "Dear Mr. Rogers," it read, "the HOA Board of Whispering Pines has voted to integrate your private road into community use. Resistance will be treated as non-compliance with neighborhood standards. Cooperation is expected and appreciated. Signed, Clare Phillips, President," complete with her trademark smiley face next to her name. I stared at that little drawing for a long while. A smiley face, the same woman who drove across my fence line, had just sent me a laminated threat with Primera, crumpled it, then stopped. No on evidence. Every crazy letter, every threat. I was keeping them all. That night, something shifted inside me. The part that used to believe in politeness and neighborly compromise, it died quietly. Right there under that laminated sheet, I realized this wasn't about a road anymore. It was about control. Over the next few days, things got weird. HOA patrol cars idled near my fence line. Drones buzzed low, pretending to survey landscaping. One guy even jogged by with a GoPro on his chest. They were watching me, testing me, waiting for a reaction. But what they didn't know, I was done reacting. I was preparing. That night, I picked up the phone again. "Derek," I said quietly, "I've got a pest problem." He groaned. "Coyotes again." "Worse," I told him. "The kind that drive SUVs and call meetings. The rumble of an engine. Metal clanks. The deep growl of a backhoe. Starting up. By sunrise, Derek's old backhoe was roaring to life, and the ground beneath Whispering Pines was about to learn a hard lesson in boundaries. Camera pans over the quiet Texas hills. Dew glistens on the dirt road. Then the roar of an old backhoe breaks the silence. They wanted access. I gave them an education, and the lesson was buried about 4 feet deep. The next morning, Derek showed up right on schedule, thermos in one hand, grin on his face. He stepped out, looked arrogant, and said, "You weren't kidding? HOA varmints, huh?" "Yep," I said. "Time for a little property maintenance." He nodded toward the road. "Where's the classroom?" I pointed halfway down the trail, right at the blind curve where Claire's SUV always came flying through. Early for deep, enough to stop an SUV in its tracks without doing real harm. Hoostanoog, to make a point. When we were done, we covered it carefully, old plywood sheets, packed with dirt, scattered with dry grass and twigs. From a distance, it looked like nothing more than another stretch of weathered road. We stood there in silence, the wind still warm, the air thick with dust and justice. "Looks like a masterpiece," Derek said. "Modern rural installation," I replied. Title: Consequences of Entitlement. He laughed so hard he nearly spilled his beer. "There," I said. "She hits that stretch, doing 30. Easy. She'll never see it coming." Derek whistled low. "How deep you want it?" I smiled. "Deep enough for reflection." He chuckled. "Philosophical trench." "Got it." The backhoe coughed, then growled to life, a sound somewhere between thunder and revenge. Dust kicked up as the first scoop of dirt tore loose. Every shovel's worth felt like reclaiming a piece of my pride. We worked until the sun dropped behind the ridge. 2 men and a machine, turning anger into engineering. The trench was about 3 feet wide, nearly 4 deep, enough to stop an SUV in its tracks without doing real harm. Just enough. To make a point, when we were done, we covered it carefully. Old plywood sheets, packed with dirt, scattered with dry grass and twigs. From a distance, it looked like nothing more than another stretch of weathered road. We stood there in silence, the wind still warm, the air thick with dust and justice. "Looks like a masterpiece," Derek said. "Modern rural installation," I replied. Title: Consequences of Entitlement. He laughed so hard he nearly spilled his beer. Before heading home, we mounted 2 hidden trail cameras in the brush, one facing the curve, one angled toward the horizon. If karma was going to show up, I wanted it in 4K. That night, I sat on the porch, the smell of dirt and diesel still on my hands. The land looked peaceful again, and for the first time in weeks, I wasn't angry. Primera wa ise calm. See, revenge doesn't always have to be loud. Sometimes it's quiet, deliberate, beautiful. At dawn, I brewed a strong pot of coffee and dragged 2 folding chairs out by the barn. Derek showed up minutes later with a box of donuts and that same mischievous grin. "You think today's the day?" he asked. "Oh, it's Friday," I said, "and Claire never misses her Friday yoga class." We sat in silence as the morning came alive. The wind was still. The cows grazed lazily. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. Then, in the distance, it came. The faint thump of bass, the roar of an engine, and a voice echoing through an open window. Clare Phillips shouting affirmations to a podcast host about manifesting personal boundaries. The irony nearly made me spit my coffee. Derek leaned closer, whispering, "Here comes the queen of asphalt." Through the shimmer of heat, her white SUV appeared over the hill. Sunlight flashing off the chrome, windshield glinting like armor. Yoga mat in the passenger seat. Iced latte in the cup holder. And sunglasses so big they probably had their own zip code. $20, says she's on speakerphone, Derek muttered. "Make it 40, I said. "And she's bragging, sure enough." She was. "Some people just don't understand community cooperation," she was saying into the phone. She hit the bend fast. Too fast. The front tires rolled onto the plywood, just the faintest creak. 10. Crack. The sound ripped through the valley like thunder. The front end of her SUV dropped straight down. Dust exploded into the air. The rear tires lifted off the ground. spinning helplessly, before slamming down again. Airbag deployed. Horn blared once. Then silence. For a second, everything froze. Through the haze, Claire sat motionless, covered in airbag powder, face pale, expression somewhere between shock and denial. Then came the scream. High-pitched, furious. Not pain. Pride. She stumbled out, clutching her phone like a weapon. Sabotage. You put my life in danger. This is criminal. She tripped over her own yoga mat, dropped her latte straight into the trench, and shrieked as it splattered all over her door. I nearly lost it. Derek was shaking beside me, trying not to laugh. Think she's calling the cops? He whispered. She already did, I said. 15 minutes later, the county sheriff's cruiser rolled up. Out stepped Sheriff Cole Matthews, a tall man in his late 50s with a permanent look. Of I've seen worse. He adjusted his hat, took one look at the trench, the SUV, and then at us, trying to look innocent behind hay bales. "Morning, ma'am," he said, calm as a monk. "Everything all right here?" "All right," Claire shouted. "Does this look all right?" This man set a trap. My car is destroyed. I could have died. The sheriff studied the scene for a long moment, then sighed. "Mr. Rogers," he said finally, "you want to explain?" "Sure do, Sheriff," I said. "That's a soil erosion project. Been planning it for weeks. This here's private property." Claire gasped. "Erosion project? Don't insult my intelligence." The sheriff raised an eyebrow. "Public road, ma'am." "Of course!" she snapped. I pulled out a folded county map from my pocket, laminated. "Just in case." "Not according to this. Deeds on file since 2009. The sheriff traced the boundary, nodded slowly. "Ma'am," he said, "this here's Rogers' land. You don't have legal access through it." Her jaw dropped. "That's ridiculous. We're all part of the same community." "Except he's not in your HOA," he replied. "See? Lens." Then the sheriff added, "You might want to call a tow truck." Camera slowly pans over the stuck SUV, half buried in the trench, pink blazer streaked with mud. By sundown, her car was still stuck. Her pride, even deeper. But 'tis was tea. The end of Clare Phillips. It was just the start of her downfall. I thought the show was over when her SUV went nose first into that trench. Turns out, the encore was even better. The next morning, I was halfway through my first cup of coffee when Derek called out from the porch. "She's back." I joined him, mug in hand. Down by the trench, 3 towed trucks lined up like an invading army, 2 flatbeds, 1 heavy crane rig. Mud splattered across the scene from last night's storm, the ground soft and slick. And there she was, Clare Phillips in yoga pants and combat boots, barking orders into her phone like a battlefield general. Her signature pink blazer was gone, replaced with a Whispering Pines HOA windbreaker, as if she'd come dressed for war. 3 trucks, Derek muttered, shaking his head. "I told you she'd double down instead of backing off." "That's her religion," I said. "She doesn't believe in losing, just louder denial." As we walked down toward the fence line, Claire spotted us instantly. "Don't you even think about recording this?" she yelled, waving a manicured finger in our direction. "This is an active recovery operation. You're legally required to stay 20 feet away." I raised my coffee cup. "Morning, Claire. You camping out here? You left your car overnight. I figured you brought Her jaw clenched so hard I heard the click from where I stood. "You will regret this, Brandon Rogers. This is criminal negligence. You built a death trap." Before I could reply, one of the tow operators, a burly man with grease-stained hands, interrupted. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "this trench looks engineered." "You sure it wasn't here before you drove through?" Claire snapped back. "Of course it wasn't. He built it to hurt me." The driver gave me a long look. The kind mechanics give customers who argue with gravity. "Lady," he sighed, "you're not getting this SUV out without lifting it." The ground's too soft. Claire stomped her boot into the mud. Then lift it. The crew fired up the crane. Chains tightening, mud flying everywhere. Every time the rig pulled, the SUV groaned like it was begging for mercy. For a moment, the front end began to rise. Then the rear wheels slipped, sending the whole setup tilting sideways. "Cut it! Cut the tension!" one of the men shouted. The chain snapped loose with a metallic crack that echoed across the field. Mud splattered across Claire's HOA jacket. Derek coughed loudly, which sounded a lot like a laugh. Even the crew looked like they were trying not to smile. The lead driver wiped his face and said, "Lady, this job's gonna need a full hydraulic lift or a miracle." Claire's response was not human. It was a scream pulled straight from the soul, a mix of rage, humiliation, and disbelief. She hurled her phone into the mud, gasped, then dove after it like she'd thrown her own child. I turned to Derek and whispered, "You think we should tell her there's cameras recording all this?" He smirked. "Absolutely not. You don't interrupt divine comedy." An hour later, the tow crew gave up. The foreman tossed his gloves into the truck. "Ma'am, we'll come back after the ground dries. You're fighting Mother Nature right now, and she's winning." Claire stood in silence, chest heaving, mud dripping down her sleeves. Then she turned to me, her voice low and venomous. "Enjoy your little victory, Brandon. You think this is over? You have no idea who you're dealing with." I raised my coffee mug again. Apparently, a woman who can't read road signs. Her nostrils flared. "You're going to jail for this." I nodded politely. "Make sure to laminate the warrant. Keeps it from smudging." She stormed off toward the HOA gate, muttering something about lawyers and environmental violations. As the trucks drove away, Derek let out a long exhale. "Well," he said, "that's the best entertainment I've had since my divorce." Premeta chuckled. "And cheaper, too." But even as the laughter faded, I felt a twinge of unease. Claire wasn't the type to lick her wounds quietly. She'd be back. Not with tow trucks this time, but paperwork. Sure enough, that evening a glossy HOA envelope waited in my mailbox. Gold-embossed seal. Comic Sans font. Because of course, tore it open. At the top, bold letters read, "Notice of environmental violation. Dear Mr. Rogers, the Whispering Pines HOA has received multiple complaints regarding hazardous trenching near community boundaries. Your unauthorized excavation poses a safety risk and violates Section 4.2 of Regional Landscaping Ordinances. You are hereby fined $100 per day until the trench is restored. Signed, Clare Phillips, President, with the same ridiculous smiley face beside her name." Derek leaned over my shoulder, reading. "She really thinks she's the county now." "Oh, it gets better," I said, flipping to the second page. She quoted Section 4.2, which is actually the recycling bin rule. We both laughed so hard. Boomer, my old hound, started barking from the porch. Still, I knew this was just a warning shot. She was trying to bury me in red tape, since the trench hadn't worked. The next morning, things got weirder. A gray Prius pulled up outside my gate, kicking up a sad puff of dust. A short, nervous man in a wrinkled suit stepped out, clutching a leather briefcase like a life raft. "Good morning," he said, voice trembling. "I'm Douglas Phillips, legal counsel for Whispering Pines HOA. I raised an eyebrow. "Phillips, huh? Any relation?" He adjusted his crooked tie. "Goes in. Of course." He opened his briefcase dramatically and handed me a stack of papers. "These are official cease and desist orders. You've been served." I skimmed the first page. Half the sentences didn't even make sense. "Doug," I said, "you do know this isn't valid, right? My land, my trench. HOA has zero jurisdiction." He cleared his throat. "Well, technically, under the UH Shared Regional..." "Doug," I interrupted gently, "do you even have a law degree?" He froze. "Working on it. Night classes. Community college, yes." "Duh." I handed the papers back. "Tell Claire, if she wants to play lawyer, She should at least hire one who's past the bar, not the smoothie bar. Doug blinked, unsure if he should take offense or notes. Then, as he turned to leave, his Prius scraped a tree root and peeled off half his bumper. Derek laughed so hard I thought he'd pass out. "This," he said between gasps, "is better than cable." But laughter aside, I knew Claire wasn't done. People like her don't quit. They regroup. And if she wanted a legal war, she was about to get one. When you live in a small town, court hearings aren't legal events, they're entertainment. And when word spread that Whispering Pines HOA versus Brandon Rogers was on the docket, the stands were full. Rogers versus Phillips, the clerk announced. Half the crowd perked up, grinning like it was Saturday night television. I stood beside Mara Pritchard, my attorney, sharp suit, sharper eyes, and a reputation for making bullies regret their hobbies. Across the room sat Clare Phillips, wearing a beige power suit so stiff it looked bulletproof. Her cousin Doug, HOA legal counsel pending certification, shuffled through his stack of disorganized folders like a magician looking for a rabbit. Judge Holloway, an older man with a voice like gravel and patience of a saint, took his seat and looked over the file. "All right," he said flatly. "Let's make this quick. Mr. Rogers, you're bringing a civil action for trespassing, property damage, and harassment, correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Mara replied smoothly. "And Miss Phillips, you're countersuing for—" He squinted at the paper. "Emotional distress, vehicular damage, and loss of social standing." Claire straightened her shoulders. "That's correct, Your Honor. I've been publicly humiliated, defamed, and endangered by Mr. Rogers' illegal booby trap." The courtroom murmured. Someone in the back actually laughed. Judge Holloway raised an eyebrow. "Miss Phillips, are you suggesting he built a booby trap?" "Yes," she barked. "A concealed pit designed to destroy my vehicle." The judge sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Ma'am, this isn't Home Alone. Do you have any proof?" Doug puffed up his chest. "Your Honor, we have photographic documentation and witness statements confirming the trench's malicious intent." He shuffled through his pile and promptly dropped half of it on the floor. "If you're watching this and shaking your head, hit subscribe right now, because trust me, this courtroom circus only gets crazier." Mara stood gracefully. "Your Honor," she said, "I'd like to submit a notarized easement agreement dated 1976, proving the HOA has no legal right to access Mr. Rogers' Road." She handed the paper to the bailiff. Judge Holloway adjusted his glasses, scanned it, and nodded. "This looks legitimate." Claire leaned forward, red-faced. "That's ancient paperwork. It doesn't apply anymore." Mara smiled sweetly. "Actually, Your Honor, it's still valid under County Code, the 1st of April, 119, unless Miss Phillips can produce a superseding agreement." Doug froze, eyes wide, hands trembling. We're still gathering documentation, sir." The judge frowned. "Gather faster, son." The gallery chuckled. Mara called me to the stand next. Her questions were calm, precise, like a scalpel. Every trespass, every destroyed sign, every Comic Sans letter. When she finally played the trail cam footage, the SUV nose-diving into the trench, inglorious. For Kay, the courtroom erupted in laughter. Even the bailiff was biting his lip to keep a straight face. Claire slammed her hand on the table. "That's illegal surveillance. The judge didn't eben Luca on private property." "Ma'am, perfectly legal." Doug rose for cross-examination, clearly nervous, but determined. "Mr. Rogers," he said, pacing like a community theater actor, "would you say you enjoy digging holes?" Primetta blinked. "Excuse me," he repeated, louder. "You seem to have an affinity for excavation. Would you say digging gives you satisfaction?" The room went silent. Then Mara coughed into her hand to hide a laugh. "Sure," I said. "I dig holes sometimes, usually when the land needs it." "Aha!" Doug shouted, spinning dramatically toward the judge. "He admits it? He digs holes. Motive? An opportunity? The judge just stared at him. Son, he said slowly, are you trying to argue that owning a shovel is evidence of criminal intent? Doug deflated. Possibly. The courtroom roared with laughter. Even the stenographer was shaking. By the afternoon, Claire had completely unraveled. She accused me of wiretapping her SUV, psychological warfare through landscaping, and colluding with the sheriff. Mara didn't interrupt once. She just let Claire talk herself into oblivion. Finally, Judge Holloway lifted a hand. Miss Phillips, Said firmly. Do you have any verifiable evidence that Mr. Rogers acted unlawfully? My words should be enough, she snapped. They aren't, he replied. Not in this courtroom. Turned to me. Mr. Rogers, anything you'd like to add before I make my ruling? I pulled a folder from my bag, the laminated easement, photos of the trench, the broken signs, and the Comic Sans letters. Just these, Your Honor. Proof that every inch of this land is mine, and proof that she ignored every warning I gave. The judge flipped through the documents, nodded slowly, and set his glasses down. I've seen enough. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Mr. Rogers. He looked directly at Claire. The Whispering Pines HOA and Miss Phillips are hereby ordered to pay damages for property destruction and harassment. Furthermore, the HOA will issue a formal written apology and is prohibited from accessing or modifying Mr. Rogers' land in any capacity. Claire gasped like a fish out of water. You can't do this. I'm the president of... Not anymore, the judge interrupted. Effective immediately, Miss Phillips is removed from her position and barred from holding any HOA office for 10 years. Doug looked like he wanted to evaporate. The gavel fell again. The crowd erupted applause, laughter, whispers of finally. Even the judge cracked a grin. Mara leaned toward me. Congratulations, Brandon. That was surgical. I smiled. You made it easy. Outside, the sun was blazing. Reporters swarmed the steps. Apparently, Trenchgate had gone viral. Derek stood waiting, wearing a T-shirt that read, Trenched by Claire. He tossed me one, figured we should match for the headlines. We posed for photos, laughing, victorious, free. That night, the clip of Claire being served, yelling at the sheriff, and tripping over her purse hit 3 million views. The comments section was pure poetry. Karma drives a tow truck. HOA equals whole of arrogance. Trench him. Brandon, for the first time in months, my phone was NT, full of HOA threats, just people cheering for justice. Peace finally returned to my land. But Hustis. Justice left its mark, deep enough to hold rain, wildflowers, and the memory of one very bad idea. They say, time heals everything. But on my land, it didn't just heal. It grew. A month after the courtroom circus ended, my ranch finally sounded like itself again. No more HOA cars slowing by my fence. No more laminated letters pretending to be law. Just peace. Steady. Honest. Earned. Mornings started the same way they always had, with coffee, sunrise, and the low hum of bees floating between the wildflowers that had claimed the trench. The air even smelled different, cleaner, lighter, and for the first time in months, I didn't wake up waiting for a fight. Derek still stopped by most evenings. He'd moved into the old guest house behind the barn. Said the quiet suited him. We'd sit on the porch, beer bottles, sweating on the railing, watching the sun dip behind the ridge. The trench, or Karen's Canyon, as the internet started calling it, sat there, glowing in the twilight. Guess we're famous now, Dara said one night, scrolling his phone. He turned the screen toward me. A viral video titled, HOA Karen vs. The Trench of Justice full courtroom footage. Over 10 million views. I laughed. Let me guess. Comment sections, brutal. A grinned. When they say no trespassing, but you hear character development. I nearly spit my beer. If you've watched this far, you've earned it. Hit subscribe because stories like this remind us that karma doesn't need fireworks, who's patans, and a good shovel. A few weeks later, something even stranger happened. The HOA reached out, not with threats, but an apology. A new interim president, Harold Jennings, came by the ranch one afternoon. An older gentleman, polite and soft-spoken. He held out his hand and said, "Mr. Rogers, we're sorry for all the foolishness." The new boards, cutting ties with Clare's policies for good. I shook his hand. "Appreciate it, Harold. You build your own road yet?" He chuckled. "Underway. Should have done it years ago." I nodded. Better late than never. For the first time, there wasn't bitterness in my chest. Just relief. The war was over, and I'd won it without losing my soul. A few months later, a car pulled up near the property gate. A couple stepped out. Kamita Ing. "Excuse me," the woman asked. "Is this where the HOA lady's car went under?" I sighed, smiling. "Yep. Right there." She gasped, like she was looking at the Grand Canyon. Her husband nodded solemnly. Beautiful justice. In its natural habitat, Wente left Derek leaned against the fence and said, "Think we should start charging admission? Pre-metala or maybe a gift shop, t-shirts, mugs, shovel, keychain, Trenched by Clare merch," he said. We both burst out laughing. Rumor had it Clare sold her house and moved to Florida. Word around town was she tried joining another HOA, but got voted out within 3 weeks. For excessive correspondence, I didn't celebrate. Didn't post about it. Didn't need to. Some lessons teach themselves, and some people just can't help digging their own holes. As for Doug, her cousin he resurfaced on Facebook advertising, Phillips and Associates, HOA legal consulting, pending certification. Mara, my lawyer, sent me the post with nothing but a crying, laughing emoji. Speaking of Mara, she became a local hero. The paper ran a piece about her victory, calling it a triumph of property rights over petty power. She even mentioned me by name. Called me the calmest man ever dragged into an HOA war. Guess that's one way to be remembered. The new HOA finally finished their own access road. Neat asphalt lined with solar lamps. I drove by the day they cut the ribbon. They'd hung a banner that read New Beginnings. Harold gave a short speech about respecting boundaries and learning from mistakes. No one mentioned Clare. No one add to. That afternoon, I came home and looked at my trench, half filled with rainwater, ducks floating lazily on the surface. A pond now, not a wound. Proof that even scars can grow something new if you leave them alone. I grabbed a can of paint and a new sign I'd ordered online. Staked it right at the start of my road. Private property, trespassers will be trenched. Half joke, half warning, but everyone around here knew better than to test which half I meant. Derek, you ever think you'd end up famous for a hole in the ground? Brandon, not in my wildest dreams. But if that's what it takes to teach people respect, I'll take it. They laugh quietly. Boomer barks in the distance. The sky fades from orange to violet. Peace doesn't trend on social media, but it sure sleeps better. Clare Phillips fell into a literal hole that day. But truth is, she'd been digging it long before. Every smug wave, every trespass, every laminated threat, shovel by shovel, until karma simply handed her the final scoop. Boundaries aren't walls, they're agreements. And when you ignore them long enough, eventually the ground gives way. Soft music fades. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had a Clare Phillips in your life? Someone who just couldn't take no for an answer. How did you handle it? And if you enjoyed this story, hit that subscribe button, because next time, well, let's just say the HOA might find out what happens when they mess with the rancher's water rights.